Thank you for joining us in Finding God in the world of video games. And we weren't really planning on doing a video on this week, but reality compelled us to, because there was just this incredibly smooth launch of the PlayStation 5 reservation system. Minutes after Sony detailed their much anticipated PS5 launch date and pricing model, the public calmly, rationally, patiently waited for their opportunity to purchase one. Meantime, I think a lot of people just kind of sat around, made a sandwich.
That did not happen at all.
Okay, well, maybe that's right. No, it was the other thing. That thing where, everyone immediately lost their collective minds, raced to their nearest retailer, while spamming every online site that could possibly have the ability to reserve a system. Pretty sure that traffic laws were broken that day. And PS5, I think, was trending on Dollar General's website for a moment, but they don't even carry those. So as websites crashed and phones started ringing off the hook, retailers were quickly overwhelmed by the demand as Sony essentially blindsided everyone by making the system available to reserve almost immediately after their press conference had ended. As the panic started to set in, I kind of felt this familiar sensation, a sudden and inexplicable need to, go and stock up on toilet paper, because I guess that's what we do now when chaos hits. At least that's what we do here in America. But in retrospect, this probably was the only inevitable outcome. After months of playing chicken on the information superhighway, Microsoft finally blinked first, and they detailed their two new Xbox consoles, setting a chain of events in motion that I doubt even they anticipated.
Yeah, and Sony countered with two PS5 consoles of their own, hitting pretty much the exact same price points with their premium disc-based model that Microsoft had, as well as confirming they would release their system on the exact same week.
And you would think that would be enough shots fired across the bow as we all settle in for a very exciting week in November. You would think that, but you would be incorrect. Sony opened up reservations for the PS5 within hours of their announcement, sending shockwaves throughout the gaming community, who was still at work in most parts of the country and now felt a sudden and pressing need to take a sick day. Just probably tell their boss that they blame it on Chipotle or whatever, because nobody would really challenge that if that was your excuse, in order just to track down a PS5 somewhere, anywhere.
I have never had any issues with Chipotle. Why do you got to bring them into it?
You're not having issues with Chipotle, and you're probably not ordering the right stuff. So back to the PS5. Now, I would like to say that everyone created peaceful, organized lines and quietly waited their turn to politely inquire as to the availability of a certain PS5 to pre-order. I would like to say that people who were lucky enough to snag a reservation only ordered one for themselves, instead of, snatching as many as they could from as many places as possible for the purpose of reselling them at a higher price. I would like to say that those who arrived a little too late were completely understanding of this incredibly unique, unprecedented, and challenging situation, and they demonstrated exceptional graciousness in their acceptance of this disappointing result.
Sure.
I would like to say all of those things, but the Bible has some very stern things to say about telling the truth and bearing false witness and all that kind of stuff, so unfortunately, I can't say any of those things.
Now, with the lack of defined protocols, both the virtual and physical retail spaces quickly evolved into a free-for-all. It was nuts. And with some people snatching as many as they could while others weren't able to react before they were gone.
Yeah, even Sony publicly admitted, which had to be hard for them, that this could have gone much, much better. And honestly, the only way it could have gone worse is if all the people who were unable to reserve a system were given a box of raw sewage as a consolation prize. And honestly, judging by many of the online reactions that I've seen from some of the disappointed consumers, maybe some of them actually did.
Yeah, and Microsoft was way quick to troll this rare misstep, which was awesome, from Sony. And there is some good news for those who didn't get a PS5 on this go-round.
That's true. The good news is that, according to Sony, there are more PS5 systems on their way to a clearly ravenous public. But the unfortunate news is that over the last several thousand years, it seems that society has not grown any more civilized than we were back in the early Old Testament era. We just have a lot more fancy technology to be uncivilized with. If you don't believe me, we're going to jump all the way back to the very beginning, in the beginning, in the book of Genesis. So humanity has struggled with even the most basic of common sense rules from the very, very beginning of time. the very first man and woman were given an incredibly easy set of rules to follow. To be honest, it was only one rule. It was one rule. You see it in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 through 17. The Lord commanded the man, said, "Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. Of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. From the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die."
I mean, that seems pretty easy, but I mean, we all know what happened, right?
I would hope so. Eve, snake, fruit of death, Adam. Suffice to say, even when there was only one basic rule for society to live by, we could not handle it. And as we continue throughout the book of Genesis, we find murder, theft, kidnapping, slavery, all of the worst elements of humanity were manifested in very short order, and God had to put a stop to it. So you look in the book of Exodus, and you're probably, if you know anything about the book at all, you're probably familiar with a set of rules known as the Ten Commandments. Although when you actually add all of them together, the Mosaic Law contained a total of 613 rules that were given to the Israelite people to give them guidance on how to function as a society, relate to each other, and of course relate to their Creator. And you would think that amount of structure would suffice. And once again, we will find that it did not.
Shortly after Moses and his successor Joshua passed away, the Israelite people began a long process of failing to live up to the standards and guidelines the Lord had set for them.
This resulted in a constant, lengthy lineup of chosen deliverers that the Lord would send to extricate them from whatever their most recent self-inflicted predicament was. These people, they were called judges, came one right after another, as the rebellious people had to be saved from a fresh misstep shortly after they were typically pulled out of their most recent moral failure.
So what does this have to do with us, and PS5 madness that, we just saw?
Oh, everything. Let me explain. Several times in the book of Judges, we see the root cause issue of why we see the people of Israel continually jumping from one ditch to another ditch, either reverting to their previous mistakes or making entirely new ones. Indeed, a few of the most horrifying accounts of man's depravity are recorded in this book of the Bible, in the book of Judges. And within it, we see a couple of mirror image verses found in two different places in the book of Judges that explain why. Judges 17:6, Judges 21:25 both contain the exact same words. In those days, there was no king in Israel, so everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Does that sound familiar? Everyone did what was right in their own eyes? Because unfortunately, that is the very heartbeat of moral relativism. The idea that we as people can choose our own level of morality and still find a way to coexist peacefully with others who may have a very different moral compass.
From Cain murdering his brother Abel to the chaos we see around the world today, society has definitely not changed
We
at all.
are still murdering our brothers in the streets. We are still doing what we think is right in our own eyes. Thousands of years of supposed advancement, and the only difference between then and now is the ability to broadcast the heinousness of our crimes against our own fathers, our mothers, our sisters, and our brothers. This PS5 misfire will eventually settle down. And over the next few years, everyone that truly wants one of these systems will find a way to get their hands on them. But we need to learn something from these lessons or we are doomed to repeat them. Moral relativism, the idea that humanity is inherently good or driven towards order, are flawed concepts. And after what we saw with the
as we saw in the books of Genesis and Judges, merely having a list of commandments or even just one simple rule, just one, didn't prevent our descent into failure either.
So if both moral relativism and then moral absolutism we saw with all these 613 rules have not gotten us anywhere, what's the answer? Well, I'm glad you asked, even though I asked. But I'm glad that you were thinking that. Because the answer is not what, but who. The reality is, we can't do this. Life. We are simply not built to make this work on our own. For goodness sake, we couldn't even manage our current pandemic situation without buying every yard of toilet paper in the country and fighting about our rights versus our privileges.
But we are as divided as we have ever been, and there is one simple answer for us.
And regardless of what you read or what you want to think, it is not a new president. It is not an old president. It is not any kind of president. It's not anarchy. And it's not any of the other options on the table. Society cannot fix this on their own because everyone is simply doing, as we saw in the book of Judges, what is right in their own eyes. We have proven time and time again that we have a need for one moral absolute. We have a need for the structure and grace that only God can give. We have a need to admit that there is only one way, and we have proven the need for Jesus. We see in John 14:6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is no way to the Father but through me." It is truly as simple and complex as that. We cannot give a love that we don't possess, regardless of our best intentions. The only true love, we see this in 1 John 4:7 and 8, is from God himself, and only he can provide it for us to give. We cannot navigate these challenging times that we find ourselves in any more than our ancestors did thousands of years ago, at least not alone.
This is why Jesus came, because the Father saw that we could not do this ourselves. Our vision of doing what we think is right has only one outcome.
And we see that in Proverbs 14:12. It says, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death." There is only one way, and it is Jesus. And if you want to know what he wants us to do, he made that incredibly clear. Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40, he was asked about the commandments and what the greatest commandment, the most important commandment was. And he narrowed it down to two. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And then the second one, he said, is basically equal to it. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Just keeping those two commandments is more than any of us ever have been able to accomplish. And that is why Jesus came.
Of course. He came to live the life that we wouldn't, and to pay the sin debt that we couldn't, and to give us a way back to the Father, a way to live this life with grace and patience and love and joy. Not just a way, the only way. And I know it can be hard to hear this, because for thousands of years we have tried to do this our way. From Adam and Eve wanting their way in the garden, to Cain wanting to serve God but to sacrifice in his way, or we saw with the people of Israel, they wanted the blessings of God throughout the book of Judges while still living their life their way. All of these ended in disaster. As a society, we have been bent on finding literally any way but the one way we have been given, to have peace with each other and to live a blessed life. This PS5 debacle, it's going to be behind us soon, at least for now. But can we learn? Can we grow from this experience?
Jesus remains the only way to improve our sin-ridden, blood-stained planet.
We were engineered for harmony, but we can only produce chaos when we are disconnected from the only source of true goodness in this universe. We're kind of like a video game system. If this is not plugged in, see, it's just sitting here. It has no access to electricity, so it's unable to achieve its function because it's not plugged in. You cannot plug a system into itself or into another system to power it on. That would be foolish. You can't plug it into whatever you'd like it to be. You can't plug it into a book. You can't plug it into a mug. You can't plug it into a table, a tub of water, a tree, or anything else that is convenient to you. This is what we, as society, as silly as it sounds, do over and over. We plug ourselves in to whatever feels right and wonder why we can't fix anything. It's only when we plug the game system into an approved power source, the one it was designed for, that the system will come to life and achieve its purpose, in this case, playing Spider-Man. And for us, there is only one way, one path, and one mediator between God and man. It is Christ Jesus.